Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Hello.
We hear you loud and clear. We are not, correct me if I'm wrong, we are not joined by Vice Chair Bailey today, right? Okay. Okay, all here, ready for action. Good morning, everybody. The time is 10:04, and I call the April 21st, 2022 Planning Board meeting to order. We have the following board members with us. We have Commissioner Washington, Commissioner Dorner. Thank you, Commissioner Dorner. I have a wave, and Commissioner Giraldo.
Present. Sorry, I wasn't sure if you're actually verbally looking for something.
And I am Chair Shapiro. Vice Chair Bailey will not be with us today. So moving forward to the business at hand, please note that the deadline for all participant pre-registration and for all submission of materials and exhibits was 12 noon on the Tuesday before this planning board meeting. This deadline is shown on the screen. I believe it is, yes. And announced in every weekly meeting. It's posted on our website, and it is clearly stated in bold red in our weekly published planning board agenda. Registered speakers may join the meeting with the link provided in the email provided by the planning board office, or listen by phone by utilizing the call-in number provided in the email. Of course, anyone may tune in to watch the planning board meeting via live stream. If you wish to speak or become a person of record, you may use our online web form. Please see the screen for that information in front of you. So in addition to the commissioners, we are joined by David Warner, who's our principal counsel. We have Deputy Planning Director Derek Berlage, Jessica Jones, who's our Planning Board Administrator, Joe Parsons, our Technical Hearing Writer, James Hunt, Division Chief, Development Review Division, Kenneth Flanagan, Senior Planning Technician. He will guide us through the exhibits, and Ryan Cron, who is our technical guru behind the scenes. So our first item in the administrative agenda is item 1 is a commissioner's item for the approval of resolutions of appreciation for 2 dedicated employees of the commission. I want to recognize these 2 folks and just read a little bit about them before we move on to the resolution. So first we have Lynn Baldwin. This is in honor of her 34 years of dedicated service to the Prince George's County Department of Parks and Recreation. And just a little bit of a background of what she'll see and we'll see in the resolution. She was a child care coordinator with the Department of Parks and Recreation in the Special Programs Division. She retired effective February 1st, 2022. More than 34 years of service, all within Maryland National County Parks and Planning, Department of Parks and Recreation. She began her tenure with the Commission in 1987 and was instrumental in the Prince George's County Employees Child Care Center in Upper Marlboro, the Prince George's County Public School Employees Child Care Center at Glenridge, in achieving Maryland State Department of Education accreditation and serving the community as models as high-quality early learning programs. She was a sought-after speaker for early childhood education conferences in Prince George's County and neighboring jurisdictions in the state of Maryland and nationally. And she earned multiple honors and recognitions throughout her career for her contributions to the Watkins, as examples for her contributions to the Watkins Regional Park Wonderful World of Oz Playground and Grammy's Garden themed play area. The Judith Hoyer Award for Outstanding Service to Children and Families of Prince George's County, and the Maryland State Child Care Challenge Award. So that is for Ms. Baldwin. Let me read a little bit about our second person who's being recognized, Mr. Chris Colvin. These are separate resolutions, but I'll ask for one motion to approve those resolutions when the time comes. So for Mr. Colvin, he was a landscape architect with the Department of Parks and Recreation in the Park Planning and Development Division. He retired effective March 31st, 2022. That's more than 36 years of service, serving in multiple roles, all within Park and Planning Department of Parks and Recreation. Throughout his career, he was awarded 2 Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission Gold Star Awards, commendation of appreciation for his work on the Seat Pleasant Neighborhood Park and for converting park planning and development design systems to CAD workstations. He also received recognition for his collaboration on the Watkins Regional Park Wonderful World of Oz Playground, and is including the American Society of Landscape Architects Merit Award from the Maryland chapter. So these are the two people we are recognizing with these resolutions. These are resolutions 2022-43 and 2022-44. Again, resolution of appreciation for Lynn Baldwin and for Chris Colvin. Is there a motion to approve the resolutions as submitted?
Move approval.
Commissioner Washington, second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Giraldo and a second by Commissioner Washington. Is there any discussion on the motions? Hearing none.
I'd just like to thank for their service.
Yeah, I'll do the same thing and point out that both of them worked on the Wizard of Oz playground that's in one of our main kind of namesake parks, and it's an incredible playground. I love it, and I wish that I had that when I was a kid. And in fact, I go and play on the playground with my kids and use that as an excuse when I go there. So fantastic job to both of them for all their service, and especially on that playground.
Thank you. Thank you. Sounds like a field trip may be in order. But thank you all very much. So we have a motion by Commissioner Giraldo, a second by Commissioner Washington. There's no further discussion. I will call the roll. Commissioner Giraldo.
Aye.
Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
But I
And I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you both for your service. Next item on the administrative agenda is the consideration of the draft minutes of April 14th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as drafted?
Move approval, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Commissioner Giraldo. That was Commissioner Giraldo, right? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Motion
Yes,
second. Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Commissioner Washington, I'll call the
Vote
roll.
aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
but I
And I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Next item on the agenda, Parks and Recreation. There are no items 3A or 3B on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is that we're going to take up is item 3C, Parks and Recreation Department briefing regarding the proposed Walker Mill Regional Park Master Park Development Plan. We have two members of staff who are going to be presenting, Ms. Worstel and Ms. Ewing. I will turn it over to them for the presentation.
Actually, Chair Shapiro, this is Bridget Stesney. I'm the Division Chief for Park Planning Development. I think I'm going to do our intro and then turn it over to Claire. So thank you, members of the Planning Board, for letting us present to you today. We are excited to be focusing on completing master plans for our regional parks throughout the county. And today we're going to present an overview of the Walker Mill Regional Park Master Development Plan, which really focuses on the north side of Walker Mill, especially one of our historic properties, Concord Manor. And as you well know, these plans guide the development of our regional parks for the next 20 years. So we're really excited about the outcome of this plan, and we're excited to share it with you today. We'll also be out at the park in a few weeks to share it with the community and to let them see the outcomes of the master plan. So before I turn it over to Claire for our presentation, I just wanted to share the appreciation for everyone who took part in this plan. It really is a full department effort for our teams that really collaborate and help us shape this vision. So I especially want to thank our partners, the Natural and Historic Resources Division. They were true partners in this, as well as the residents of the county who helped participate. And then from our own park planning and development team, Sonia Ewing, Joseph Arce, Claire Worstel, Laura Connolly, and Tanya Hedgepath all had heavy plant hands in guiding this document. And so with that, thank you for your time. And I'm going to hand it over to Claire, our lead strategic park planner, to update you on our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stesney.
Good morning, Chair Shapiro, members of the board. For the record, my name is Claire Worstel, and I'm the lead strategic park planner with the Department of Parks and Recreation. And I am here today to present the Walker Mill Regional Park Master Park Development Plan. Next slide, please. Great. Today, we'll talk about the process undertaken to develop this plan, the final recommendations, and the implementation plan for the next 20 years. Next slide. Walker Mill Regional Park is one of 4 existing regional parks in our system. We conducted our first master park development plan at Watkins Regional Park in 2018. We've just finished Walker Mill. We're in the process of wrapping up Casca. And after that, we'll begin the master plan for Fairland Regional Park. Walker Mill is the only regional park located inside the Beltway. It is 504.6 acres, divided roughly in half by Walker Mill Road. A master plan for the south side of the park was completed in 2004 and has undergone a multi-million-dollar renovation over the past 10 years. Next slide. Walker Mill's unique location inside the Beltway affords it many opportunities for connectivity with various metro stations, commercial hubs, local historic sites, and the new Central Avenue Connector Trail. Next slide. As we kicked off the master plan process, we set the following plan priorities. We wanted to plan for circulation, both within the north side of the park, connections between the north and south side, connections to the surrounding community as well. We also wanted to make meaningful connections between the Concord Historic Site, which is on the property, and the other Ridgely family properties along Central Avenue, including the Ridgely Rosenwald School, the church, and the farm. We wanted this plan to result in a recommendation for signature events, additional facilities, as well as public art. Next slide. As we performed the opportunities and constraints analysis to separate the developable areas of the site from the areas to be preserved, the site has many acres of mature forest, prime farmland, steep slopes, streams, and wetlands. There's also an easement through the Maryland Historic Trust on the Concord Historic Site, which limits development within that envelope and protects the historic viewshed. That leaves us with 14.5 acres of developable land on the west side and 6.8 acres on the east side, and that is out of the whole north side being roughly 250 acres. Next slide. From the analysis, we divided the park into various experience zones. The existing developed area on the south side is called the Southern Athletic Zone. The developable area in the dark green is the Western Active Zone. The developable area in the light green are the Eastern Active Zones. The brown area is the Community Agriculture Zone, which is prime farmland that was historically farmed. And the area in the purple is the Concord easement. The rest of the park in light blue will remain in conservation. Let's see, we're at the next slide. In order to determine future uses and activities at the park, we did a lot of community engagement through surveys, meetings, and focus groups. The top requests were for agricultural and garden uses, conservation of natural resources, expansion of cultural history of the site, multi-generational programming, and ease of access for the community. Next slide. From that engagement and analysis, we developed a vision for the park, which touches on all the elements we discussed so far as a key to the future of Walker Mill Park. To meet the vision, the plan will enhance the historic setting by renovating the Concord Manor and the outbuildings. It'll incorporate gardens and agricultural features that complement the historic site. We'll develop programs and events that showcase Prince George's County African American history and art. We'll create safe connections across Walker Mill Road and develop a comprehensive system of trails that weave the park and the surrounding neighborhoods together, and meet the community and commission facility needs through the construction of a park police substation and maintenance facility. Next slide, please. We'll now talk a little bit more in depth about each zone. This is a rendering of a view from Walker Mill Road toward the historic Manor House and the grounds. Next slide. As per the protection of the Maryland Historic Trust easement, the master plan recommends maintaining the viewshed, but also enhances the visitor experience by renovating the house and other historic buildings on site, such as the corn crib and the stable, and creating a great lawn for future music and art events, as well as adding interpretive signage to tell the story of the people who once lived and worked at this location. Next slide. This is a rendering of the developable area of the western zone, which will be the most active part of the north side of the park. Next slide. This slide will provide, this side will provide parking for the garden uses as well as the historic site. A welcome center and a small splash area will be surrounded by native gardens, children's gardens, an art walk, picnic pavilions, play spaces, and trails connecting this area to the rest of the park. Next slide. This is a rendering of the agricultural part of the eastern zone and shows urban agriculture at many scales, from community gardens to 1 acre to multi-acre plots. Next slide. This park will address the existing need and desire for local and urban agriculture, where the immediate communities can learn techniques for larger scale farming and gardening with 1 to 3 acre plots or more in a more urban context. This model is currently being piloted at Watkins Regional Park, and there are opportunities here for farmers markets as well as educational activities and field trips. This part of the park will also house a park police facility and maintenance facility. The community has requested a staff presence at this park, and the location inside the Beltway and close to the Central Avenue provides operational efficiencies for our maintenance staff. Next slide. Walker Mill Road is a zone in itself. The roadway bisects the park, and bicycle and pedestrian safety is essential for the park's long-term success. We are envisioning a gateway to alert drivers that they are entering a park setting. Additional traffic calming measures like hawk signals and protected bicycle and pedestrian lanes are recommended, and the department has applied for a technical assistance grant to further study these measures, as this is a very keystone part of the plan. Next slide. Finally, the robust trail system is what ties all of this together. There are approximately 9 miles of new trail that will take users through the various sections of the park and connect to Walker Mill Road, Millwood Drive, and Central Avenue Connector Trail. The trails also take advantage of the Pepco easement, which has some ideal terrain for mountain biking, and the Chesapeake Beach Rail Trail goes through this site as well. Next slide. The plan breaks these improvements into 4 6-year phases, with the majority of the work happening in phases 1 and 2, so the first 12 years. Staff will further be refining the implementation plan in order to move into feasibility or design for certain aspects and make funding requests for others. Next slide. So thank you everyone for your time this morning, and we would love to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Worstel. Let me turn to my commissioners and see if you have questions. Start with Commissioner Washington. I saw Commissioner Geraldo's hand go up.
Oh, that's okay. Commissioner Washington could go first.
No, I don't have any questions, but great job, team.
Yes, it is a great job. I have one question. So with the Chesapeake Beach Trail, that means you can walk from Watkins to Chesapeake Beach?
Walker Mill. That trail is not completely finished. It exists in sections. So we would have a section of the Chesapeake Beach Trail that goes through this. But okay. Historically, it did go from Chesapeake Beach through Walker Mill and beyond. Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Washington, Commissioner Doerner.
Yeah, I have a few. I would say echo the comments of how great this is. And I think Commissioner Geraldo slipped up saying Watkins, because this is now going to rival Watkins Park in a lot of ways. This is great. This is really good. And it's awesome to see, especially like the Ninja course. I might have to shrink myself so I can participate on that once it's available. I have 2 questions. One, I just want to know a little bit about the mountain biking sort of reference to that, because we don't really have a whole lot of mountain biking opportunities in the county. And I want to know kind of the plan for that. And then also on the agricultural plots, that looks fantastic to be doing this. And I want to know if we're thinking about if the production will be enough to potentially not just sell it in farmers markets, but also aid like local schools, the county public school system, if we could have healthy options that would come just straight out of our parks and go on the tables for children in some of the school systems, or maybe it's more kind of smaller scale and more instructional.
So on the first question about the mountain biking, the Pepco easement runs along the north central part of the property. And in that area, there is flat terrain that is parallel to some more rocky terrain that does appear to be ideal for some mountain biking. And it appears when we were out there that some people are using for that at this moment, just unsanctioned. And so using that for mountain bike, there was a lot of interest in the community for activities for kids that are more teen age. We have a lot of activities for younger kids, but not a lot of activities for those older kids. We have been in discussions with Pepco about mirroring what is being done in Montgomery County with using their easements for trails. So that is the idea going forward, is that you could have some flatter trails as well as some mountain bike trails through there. On your question related to the agriculture, I think those are all great ideas. Prince George's County Community College also has some urban agriculture interest. There are a number of churches that we worked with during this plan that also have interest in some small scale urban agriculture. And we are working with EcoCity Farms at Watkins Regional Park. And so there's a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot of opportunity for agriculture at multiple scales. And I think we could probably start at some smaller scales and continue to grow as we get more interest and we get more innovative.
Okay, no, all this sounds great. I'm happy to hear that we're finally moving forward on the Pepco easements, because I think that's kind of one of the low-hanging fruit to get to our goal of 400 plus miles of biking paths throughout the county. I think that would be great for connectivity. And on the agricultural side, even if it doesn't go into the schools, something else to kind of think about would be potentially selling it at subsidized prices to lower income houses, or providing that in places that we could that are maybe food deserts, or have other kind of socioeconomic challenges, to see if we could kind of give back in that way. And people could be eating produce that's sourced directly from their local county.
Those are great suggestions. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions from commissioners? So just a few on my part. One, you caught my attention when you talked about the potential for hawk signals, and I just don't know whether is that new technology to the commission? Do we use hawk signals in other facilities? Do you know?
I do not. Sonia or Bridget, do you know if we have them at any other facilities?
Given that this is a county road, it would be something that we would partner with DPW&T on. We have worked with them on hawk signals at some specific trail crossings, especially as we have implemented them with the development community as larger developments have gone in. This would be the first where we're bridging one side of a park to another, though.
Okay. I'm a big fan of that technology. It can be a little controversial, but lots of experience with how effective they can be. And the other thing, Commissioner Joyner captured a lot of my questions, but I was really intrigued by how the agricultural piece of this would fit into the broader food ecosystem in the county. And you mentioned some of the partnerships that you've had. Are you working with is it the Food Equity Council? Is that the group? And there are other folks looking at this. I mean, I just think there's just such a wealth of opportunities here. So I don't know what to do beyond just amplify what Commissioner Joyner said, but I think there's just I'd like to really make sure that those kinds of partnerships and investments are not in phase 4.
Yes, the agricultural piece is in one of the earlier phases, so that will be happening sooner than later. And yes, we have been talking with there are actually various groups in the area that have farmers markets. There's the Capitol Heights food group that we've been talking to a lot. They're local. There's been a lot of local interest in this, and we will continue to work with those groups as we launch this. I do recommend just going down the road regarding the hawk signal and checking out Walker Mill Regional Park. You can really feel as you ride through there the disconnect between the north and the south right now. So you'll be able to really see how we plan for a user to experience it with the gateway and slowing down the traffic. And now that you've seen the plan, hopefully you'll be able to go and be able to envision it.
It's wonderful. Yeah, nice work, everybody. If there's no further questions, I want to thank you all for your time in the presentation and all the good work that you put in so far. Thank you very much. Okay. No further questions. We'll end that presentation. This is not an action item. This is just education for us. So with that, we will move on to our consent agenda. Is that right? Yes, okay. We have items 4A and 4B. These are draft resolutions. Does any commissioner oppose any of the items on the consent agenda? Hearing no opposition, look for a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, after consideration of the record for items numbers 4A and 4B, I move adoption of staff findings and approval of the items on the consent agenda in accordance with the recommendations of staff.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner?
Aye.
And Commissioner Shapiro votes aye. The ayes have it 4-0. We will now begin the regular agenda items. Our order for the day will be as follows. Please note, we'll begin with item 5. That will be followed by items 9, and then items 6, 8, and 7 in that order. So 9, 5, 9, 6, 8, 7, and we'll start with item 5. This is item 5 is an extension request for preliminary plan of subdivision. This is 4-19031 East Pines. Participating in this case, our staff, for the staff is Eddie Diaz Campbell, and then we have the attorney, Christopher Hatcher. There are 2 additional speakers. I assume they're part of the applicant's team, Patrick Cooper and Gary Evans. And I will turn, and we have no other speakers listed. I will turn it over to staff for presentation. Mr. Diaz Campbell.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, I am Eddie Diaz Campbell with the subdivision section. Item number 5 on the agenda is an extension request for preliminary plan of subdivision 4-19031 East Pines. This preliminary plan of subdivision was approved by the planning board on May 28, 2020, and is valid through May 28, 2022. By letter dated February 14, 2022, the applicant requested a 1-year extension of the plan's approval. This is the applicant's first extension request. If this request is approved, the preliminary plan of subdivision will be valid through May 28, 2023. The subject preliminary plan of subdivision approved 1 parcel to support development of 250 multifamily dwelling units and 25,000 square feet of commercial floor area. This preliminary plan was approved under the provisions of the prior zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, and therefore, pursuant to Section 24-1704A of the subdivision regulations, extensions of time available under the prior subdivision regulations remain available. Section 24-119D of the prior subdivision regulations authorizes the planning board to grant an extension to the normal expiration of a preliminary plan of subdivision if certain criteria are met. For this preliminary plan, the criteria is Section 24-119D5A, Romanet 1 through Romanet 5, apply. These criteria and their findings are listed in the staff memorandum. Staff found that all 5 criteria were met. Based on staff's findings and the project's eligibility for a 1-year extension as found in Criterion 5, staff recommends that the planning board grant a 1-year extension of preliminary plan of subdivision 4-19031 East Pines pursuant to Section 24-119D of the prior subdivision regulations. And I do need to correct on the record the name of the applicant for this case. Their name is DGV Apartments LLC, not DVG Apartments as listed in the staff memo. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you for the presentation. Thanks for the correction as well. This seems pretty straightforward, folks. Any questions for staff, commissioners? No questions for staff. Let me turn it to the attorney for the case, Mr. Hatcher.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, commissioners. For the record, my name is Chris Hatcher with CL Hatcher, with the office in Upper Marlboro, here on behalf of the applicant DGV Apartments LLC. I'd like to thank staff for working with this, and as you guys have seen in the staff report, this is a pretty complicated subdivision with assemblage of properties and requiring extensive coordination with MTA on the Purple Line location. With that, we respectfully request that the planning board approve the preliminary plan of subdivision extension as recommended by staff, and we are here to respond to any questions you may have. Mr. Chair, the 2 individuals that you listed are members of the applicant's team, and we're all here to respond to any questions, but we don't necessarily need to say anything additional.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hatcher. Appreciate that. So are there questions for the applicant? Questions for Mr. Hatcher? Hearing no questions, Is there any other questions from staff regarding this? Any further questions or anything to add? No, Mr. Diaz-Campbell, good to go. Okay, hearing no further, and there's no questions. Any further questions from commissioners? Hearing none, I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the recommendation of staff and approve the one-year extension for preliminary plan 4-19031.
Thank you. We have motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion with noting the correction that that staff made with regards to the name of the applicant.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Commissioner Giraldo, with a notation to recognize that to reflect the accurate name in this. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, let me call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Thank you, Mr. Hatcher. Next item on the agenda is item 9. This is an extension request for a preliminary plan 4-19003 Pecan, or Pecan, as your preference might be, Ridge Conservation Subdivision. Participating in this case is Maridula Gupta, and the attorney for the applicant is Ed Gibbs and Haller. We have additional speakers listed as well that I assume are with the applicant team, Mr. Cintron, Mr. Villegas, and Mr. Howe. Let me turn it over to Ms. Gupta to begin the presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. For the record, I'm Maridula Gupta with the subdivision section. Item number 9 on the agenda is an extension request for preliminary plan of subdivision 4-19003 titled Pecan Ridge. This conservation subdivision was approved by the planning board on February 20th, 2020, and it is valid through March 12th, 2022. The applicant requested a one-year extension of the plan's approval, and if this request is approved, the preliminary plan of subdivision will be valid through March 12th, 2023. This is the applicant's first extension request. The subject preliminary plan of subdivision approved 80 lots and 8 parcels for the development of 80 single-family dwelling units. Section 24-1704A of the subdivision regulations states that subdivision approvals of any type remain valid for the period of time specified in the subdivision regulations under which the subdivision was approved. Extensions of time which were available under those subdivision regulations shall remain available. Preliminary plan of subdivision 4-19003 was approved under the prior subdivision regulations, and section 24-119D of the prior subdivision regulations authorizes the planning board to grant an extension to the normal expiration of a preliminary plan of subdivision if certain criteria are met. For this preliminary plan, the criteria under section 24-119A, Romanet 1 through Romanet 5 apply. These criteria and their findings are listed in the staff memorandum. Staff found that all 5 criteria were met. Based on staff's findings and the eligibility of a one-year extension as found in criterion 5, staff recommends that the planning board grant a one-year extension for preliminary plan of subdivision 4-19003 Pecan Ridge, pursuant to section 24-119D of the prior subdivision regulations. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gupta, for the presentation, for the clear presentation. And staff recommendation is to approve the extension. Questions from commissioners? Anything from my fellow board members? Pretty straightforward. No questions. Let me turn it over to the representative of the applicant, Mr. Gibbs. Good to see you, Mr. Gibbs.
Yes, good morning, Chair Shapiro. I have obviously appeared before you on many occasions when you were on the County Council, and it's a pleasure to be before you today. Congratulations and welcome. This
Thank
is obviously my first appearance before the board since you became the new chair. So thank you very much. I really don't have anything further that I could add. Everything is in the staff report and in our supporting documents. I do want to thank the staff for working with us on this and very much appreciate the staff recommendation of approval. And in particular, I'd like to thank Ms. Sherry Connor and your attorney, Mr. David Warner. So thank you very much. I have a number of people signed up. They're all part of the either the applicant themselves or the applicant's team, and they have nothing that they need to say unless there are any questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. And again, this is pretty straightforward. And I think for the public, I would say sometimes when cases like these feel so straightforward, we forget how much work is involved on the staff side in collaboration with the applicant to get us to the point where there are no issues of substance that are before us. So I recognize that. I think I can speak for all my fellow board members in recognizing all the work that goes on behind the scenes. So are there questions for the applicant, for the attorney from any of my fellow board members? Seeing none, let me look for a motion.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll first associate myself with your comments and thank the team, because you're right. There is a lot of work that goes into this. And with that, I move that we adopt the recommendation of staff and approve the one-year extension for preliminary plan 4-19003.
I'll second that and adopt. I'll second it and I'll adopt the comments by you and by Commissioner Washington.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye for Pecan Ridge, is how I would say it. I'll also note you can say pecan, pecan, or pecan. So there's actually three kind of recognized ways depending on where you are. It's not even like north versus south. It's actually a distinction kind of between the Carolinas and the Georgia, kind of northern Florida areas. And I'm always used to saying it pecan, so that's how I'm going to say it.
Well, I'm from South Carolina, and we say pecan. Since you had to go there geographically, Commissioner.
I think we have our first item for our commissioners retreat to debate, so we'll take this up at a later day. But thank you. So I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Gupta, Mr. Gibbs.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Also would like to extend my thanks to Ms. Gupta. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant day and a great weekend. Spring has finally arrived, hopefully.
Thank you. Yes,
Thank
indeed.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Thanks, Ms. Gupta.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to the next item, which is item number 6. This is a preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21041 Retreat at Glendale. Participating in this case are Mr. Diaz-Campbell again, and the attorney for the applicant is Matthew Tedesco. We have some additional speakers as well, Mr. Ness, Sally Stewart, Philip Hughes, Michael Leonard, which I assume again are all part of the applicant's team. There's some additional backup materials that were received prior to Tuesday at noon deadline, so they are part of the record. There's the proposed revisions to conditions, there's the renderings, and I think that is it for the additional materials. So let me turn to Mr. Diaz-Campbell to begin your presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, for the record, once again, I am Eddie Diaz-Campbell, Senior Planner with the Subdivision Section. Item number 6 on the agenda is the preliminary plan of subdivision for the Retreat at Glendale, 4-21041. The subject project proposes 13 lots for the development of 13 single-family detached dwellings. As a matter of housekeeping, staff has received one item of additional backup, which was received before the noon deadline on May 19. This is a letter from the applicant requesting one revision to the recommended conditions of approval. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for noting that. Next slide, please.
Can I hold you right there? Because I believe we have 2 records. I'm not sure that it matters, but I have that as well.
I'm sorry. Yes, two Two items,
Thank
the other one being the rendering. Excuse
Thank
me.
you, Mr. Gaskell. Keep going.
All right. The site is located in the northern part of Prince George's County within Planning Area 71A and Council District 4. Next slide, please. More specifically, the site is located on the north side of Springfield Road, approximately 115 feet northwest from the intersection of Springfield Road and Good Luck Road. Next slide, please. The zoning map shows that the property is in the rural residential, or RR zone. To the east are developed and undeveloped prior subdivisions also located within the RR zone. To the south across Springfield Road is the parcel zoned RR, which is the site of the historic Perkins Chapel and other places of worship. Further south are residential subdivisions in the residential estate, or RE zone. To the west and north is the Patuxent Research Refuge in the reserved open space, or ROS zone. Next slide, please. The property zoning notwithstanding, this preliminary plan subdivision was accepted for review prior to April 1, 2022, and is therefore reviewed under the prior zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, pursuant to Section 24-1703A of the subdivision regulations. Under the prior zoning ordinance, this site was also in the RR zone. This preliminary plan subdivision was therefore evaluated according to the former standards of the RR zone rather than the current standards. Next slide, please. The aerial photograph shows that the site currently has one single-family detached dwelling in the southern part of the site, which is proposed to be raised. Due to the age of the house, staff is recommending that it be recorded on a Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties form before demolition. The northern part of the site has woodland which is to be partially retained. Next slide, please. This photo shows another view of the site from an aerial perspective. Next slide, please. The site map shows that the site has a hilly topography, with the highest elevations in the center of the site. The site will be graded to allow placement of a new street and the dwellings, with the slopes to be located to the rear of the site in between the northernmost dwellings and the woodland which is to be retained. Next slide, please. The master plan right-of-way map shows Springfield Road, Good Luck Road, and Duckettown Road, all of which are master plan collector roads. Adequate right-of-way dedication to Springfield Road, where its ultimate 80-foot right-of-way is provided with this preliminary plan of subdivision. The two critical intersections determined to be impacted by the development are shown by the red bullseyes on this slide and are further described in detail in the staff report. The analysis performed by staff found that these intersections would operate adequately under total traffic conditions. Next slide, please. The preliminary plan shows 13 lots outlined in red. Existing and proposed rights-of-way are shown in blue. One new public street is proposed in order to serve the new lots. Adequate public facilities, including water, sewer, fire, rescue, and police facilities, are available to serve the site. A fee in lieu is proposed to be provided to meet the mandatory dedication of parkland requirement. Next slide, please. This application is subject to the Woodland Conservation Ordinance, and a Type 1 tree conservation plan has been filed with the application. This TCP1 shows the subject parcels in red and the right-of-ways in blue. Woodland preservation areas are shown in green. The requirements of the Woodland Conservation Ordinance are proposed to be met with 0.87 acres of woodland preservation and 3 acres of off-site woodland conservation. There is no primary management area on site. The TCP1 also shows the location of 3 specimen trees which are proposed for removal, shown by the green circles. The applicant submitted a variance request supporting removal of the trees. As described in finding 13 of the staff report, staff supports removal of the 2 specimen trees which would be needed to be removed in order to construct a cul-de-sac at the end of the new street. Staff does not, however, support removal of the 3rd specimen tree, which is proposed to be removed because of the stormwater outfall which is to cross its critical root zone. Staff believes that the tree should be able to survive the installation of the outfall, and if it does not pose a fall hazard to surrounding structures. Staff recommends partial approval of the variance request in order to remove 2 of the 3 specimen trees proposed for removal. Next slide, please. In conclusion, subdivision staff recommends that the planning board adopt the findings and approve preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21041 Retreat at Glendale, as well as Type 1 tree conservation plan and TCP 1-004-2022, and a variance from section 25-122B1G for removal of 2 specimen trees, subject to conditions contained in the staff report. The applicant has communicated 1 proposed revision to conditions of approval recommended in the report, which is included on the record. The purpose of this revision is to delete the requirement that an approved stormwater management concept plan be submitted prior to certification of the pre-lay plan. Because no regulated environmental features will be affected by the stormwater facilities shown in the plan, staff agrees that the approved stormwater management concept plan may be submitted prior to approval of a Type 2 tree conservation plan, which is a standard requirement. Staff concurs with the applicant's proposed revision. The associated findings in the staff report will be revised for the resolution. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Are there questions for staff on this case? And just to be clear, what you're recommending is approval, but with 1 change to the conditions. That's it, which you just described. The 3rd specimen tree, is that a separate recommendation?
So the staff report recommends partial approval of the variance. So that recommendation from the staff report does not need to change. But yes, there's 1 condition from the staff report not related to the variance, which staff is recommending deletion of for the applicant's request.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. So let me turn to my fellow commissioners with any questions.
I have none.
Commissioner Washington, Board Member Dorner, no questions?
No questions.
I'll just point out that what Mr. Diaz-Campbell was saying is that one of the recommendations in the list that are into the staff reports actually says preserve that tree, that specimen tree within there. So that's why it's a partial recommendation of approval of the variation.
Okay, thank you for that.
It's already covered in there.
All right, thanks for that. Appreciate it. Okay, no questions for staff. Let me turn to the attorney for the case, Mr. Tedesco.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be before you. Good morning, fellow commissioners and staff. Mr. Chairman, let me take this opportunity. This is my first appearance before you after your recent appointment. I just want to say congratulations and echo my colleague, Mr. Gibbs's sentiments with welcome, and it's nice to have you. I also want to thank Mr. Diaz-Campbell for his review of this application and his excellent staff report and his presentation this morning, as well as the environmental planning staff who worked with us on this application. You did go through the speakers that are registered. As you indicated correctly, they are all here on behalf of the applicant. Just by way of another introduction, Mr. Stephen Ness, he is the applicant's representative for Springfield Road Partnership, LLC. We have Philip Hughes and Sally Stewart from Charles P. Johnson & Associates. They are the civil engineers and land planners for the project. And Mr. Mike Lenhart from Lenhart Traffic and Consulting. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, in keeping with the theme of today's hearing, is trying to keep everything fairly smooth and fluid with respect to some of these cases. This one, like the previous, is pretty straightforward. As I mentioned, we work very closely with Mr. Diaz-Campbell, Ms. Connor, as well as Mr. Juba, Environmental Planning. I did just want to highlight a couple of things just for the board's edification. Originally submitted this application requested 15-lot subdivision. However, after subdivision development review committee, we did work closely with, particularly with environmental planning, and to provide on-site woodland preservation for this project, a portion thereof, which resulted in the loss of 2 lots, yielding 13 that are now before you for hopeful approval. We also worked very closely with the Glendale Citizens Association. We met with them on March 15th, reviewed this application with them. They had no major concerns or objections to it. With that, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we agree with staff's recommendations. We did submit 1 exhibit with the modification that was articulated by Mr. Diaz-Campbell, and that's the deletion of condition 8. I further would adopt Mr. Diaz-Campbell's justification for that deletion. My understanding is that staff is in agreement with that, and we would ask for the findings to be modified accordingly. And other than that, I would just highlight the fact that no referring agencies or sections recommended anything other than approval for this application. And so we thank all agencies that reviewed this and staff for its recommendation, and would be happy to answer any questions that you may have on this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tedesco. Let me turn it over to my colleagues to see if you have any questions.
I have no questions.
No questions.
Thank you. Ms. Dorner, no questions?
No questions.
Thank you. So we have no questions, and I as well have no questions. This feels pretty straightforward. We have, you were aligned with staff. There's one change to conditions. Staff is in agreement with that. If there's nothing else that you have, Mr. Tedesco, let me turn to my commissioners for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and approve preliminary plan 4-21041 and TCP 1-004-2022, partial approval of variance to section 25-122B1G, covering the two specimen trees, not cheese.
It's almost lunchtime, Commissioner Washington.
As communicated by staff, along with the associated conditions, and is further modified by applicant exhibit number 1, and would also ask that we incorporate in the adoption the modified findings as outlined by staff related to the deletion of condition number 8.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Mr. Chair, I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
And I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Thank you, Mr. Tedesco and team.
Thank you, Chairman.
Commissioners, do we need a break? Are you for a few minutes? Are you okay? All right, good. Okay. So next item is item 8. This is a preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21032 Hyattsville Crossing. Participating in this case is Mr. Diaz-Campbell again, and for the applicant, we have attorney Tom Haller.
I'm present, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. We have some proponents as well. I'm assuming these are members of the applicant's team, though there's a representative of the city of Hyattsville, Taylor Roby. The other proponents are Mr. Bickle, Mr. Gingles, Mr. Lenhart, and Ken Dunn with Soltez. Mr. Haller, do you want the representative of the city of Hyattsville to speak first, or should I turn it to you and you take it away?
No, I'll speak after Mr. Diaz-Campbell provides the staff presentation.
I'm sorry, I skipped. Let me turn to Mr. Diaz-Campbell, who will give the staff presentation first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hold that question for when it comes to your time, Mr. Howard. Take it away, Mr. Diaz-Campbell.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I am Eddie Diaz-Campbell, Senior Planner with the Subdivision Section. Item number 8 on the agenda is the preliminary plan of subdivision for Hyattsville Crossing, 4-21032. The subject project proposes 3 parcels for 380 multifamily dwelling units, as well as 1,068,471 square feet of commercial floor area to remain. The property is the site of the Mall at Prince George's, and there are specific recommendations for the site given in the 2016 Prince George's Plaza Transit District Development Plan, which will be discussed in this presentation. As a matter of housekeeping, staff received 1 item of additional backup, which was received before the noon deadline on May 19. This is a letter from the applicant requesting revisions to the recommended conditions of approval. Though staff is not in agreement with the revisions requested in this letter, following its submittal, staff and the applicant did reach agreement on an alternative set of revisions, which I will read into the record at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. The site is located in the northwestern part of Prince George's County, within Planning Area 68 and Council District 2. Next slide, please. More specifically, the site is located on the north side of Maryland 410 between Toledo Terrace and Bellcrest Road. Next slide, please. The zoning map shows that the property is in the core area of the Regional Transit-Oriented High Intensity Zone, or RTOHC zone. The property is surrounded by other properties that are similarly zoned RTOH, with properties in the core area shown in dark blue on this slide, and properties in the edge area, or RTOHE, shown in light blue. Next slide, please. The property zoning notwithstanding, this preliminary plan subdivision was accepted for review prior to April 1, 2022, and is therefore reviewed under the prior zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, pursuant to Section 24-1703A of the subdivision regulations. Under the prior zoning ordinance, this site was in the mixed-use infill, or MUI zone. This preliminary plan subdivision was evaluated according to the standards of that zone. Next slide, please. Under the prior zoning, the property was also in the Transit District Overlay Zone, or TDO, associated with the 2016 Prince George's Plaza Transit District Development Plan. The TDDP includes design standards for the TDO, which will be discussed further in this presentation. Next slide, please. The aerial photograph shows that the site is currently developed with a large enclosed shopping mall and several pad sites and outbuildings. As part of the proposed development, the applicant will raise the northernmost building, former auto center, and part of the mall building, the former J.C. Penney's, for a total of 60,546 square feet of commercial gross floor area to be removed, resulting in the 1,068,471 square feet of commercial floor area to remain. The aerial photograph also shows the uses surrounding the property. These include multifamily apartments to the north, commercial office uses to the west, and mixed multifamily and retail uses to the south across Maryland 410 and to the east across Bellcrest Road. Next slide, please. This photo shows another view of the site from an aerial perspective. Next slide, please. The site map shows that the site is entirely paved and that the topography reflects the developed nature of the site. No Type 1 tree conservation plan was required for this site. Next slide, please. The master plan right-of-way map shows Maryland 410 and Arteo Road, and Bellcrest Road, a collector road, and Toledo Terrace and Toledo Road, which are primary roads. These roads are included in the 2009 Master Plan of Transportation. No right-of-way dedication is required for any of these existing roadways. In addition to those roads listed in the 2009 MPOT, the 2016 TDDP amended the MPOT to include a master plan local municipal road known as Toledo Road Extended, which is shown by the black dotted line on this slide. The TDDP specifies that this road is located on the north side of the mall property. It also specifies that the road is intended to formalize the existing drive aisle in this location, which connects between the mall entrance at Bellcrest Road to the east and the mall entrance at Toledo Terrace to the west. Though the TDDP specifies that the road is to be dedicated to the city of Hyattsville, the city will only accept the road as dedicated right-of-way once it has been fully improved to the public standard. Therefore, in the interim conditions, staff is recommending that the future right-of-way be delineated on the preliminary plan of subdivision, and that a public use easement be established over the entirety of the existing drive aisle to ensure adequate public access to the new multifamily buildings. Several recommended conditions to enact these recommendations are included in the technical staff report. A revision to one of these conditions will be read into the record at the end of this presentation. The 5 critical intersections determined to be impacted by the development are shown by the red bullseyes on this slide and are further described in detail in the staff report. The analysis performed by staff found that all critical intersections will operate at adequate levels of service. However, staff did have concerns about potential queuing problems along Bellcrest Road and along Toledo Road Extended, which could be caused by the intensification of the uses on site and proposed changes to the traffic control devices on site. To address this concern, staff is recommending that the applicant perform additional analyses of the northeast and northwest site entrances prior to acceptance of a detailed site plan. The result of these analyses may indicate a need for additional traffic control devices to change the traffic circulation on site in order to prevent excessive queuing. The specific changes to address queuing are currently described in the staff report, including connecting the 2 existing medians near the northeast entrance and adding a raised triangle island near the northwest entrance. The analyses recommended to be performed will allow the applicant a chance to propose their own solutions to any queuing problems found and allow staff a chance to evaluate the proposed solutions. A recommended condition requiring the analyses will be read into the record at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. The preliminary plan shows 3 parcels outlined in red. Parcel 1 is the largest parcel and will contain nearly all of the existing mall building. Parcel 2 is located near the northwest corner of the site and will contain both of the proposed multifamily buildings. Parcel 3 is located just south of Parcel 2 and is proposed to contain 68,146 square feet of the existing mall building. The existing buildings are shown in bright yellow, while the building area to be raised is shown in light yellow. The plan shows that the proposed demolition will make room for the new multifamily buildings and create a new north-facing facade for the tenant space on Parcel 3. Existing public rights-of-way are shown in blue, while proposed public access easements are shown in light blue. 2 public access easements are proposed starting from the northwest site entrance. These are a permitted means of access to the internal parcels under Section 24-128B8 of the subdivision regulations, because the site is in the TDO. The first easement wraps south around Parcel 2 in order to serve Parcel 3. The second extends across the northern boundary of the site to ensure Parcel 2 is served from both the northeast and northwest site entrances. As previously discussed, the second easement needs to be modified to cover the existing drive aisle, and it will ultimately be replaced by public right-of-way once future development improves Toledo Road Extended to a public standard along its full length and the City of Hyattsville is ready to accept dedication. Adequate public facilities, including water, sewer, fire, rescue, and police facilities, are available to serve the site. Next slide, please. The mall site features 3 existing access points to Maryland 410, shown in the red circles. Maryland 410 is an arterial roadway, and these existing access points are not proposed to be changed with this application. However, Section 24-121A3 of the prior subdivision regulations requires that when lots are proposed on land adjacent to an arterial road, they shall be designed to front on an interior street or service road. No interior streets or service roads are proposed, so the applicant filed a variation request from Section 24-121A3 to allow the existing access points to remain. Staff recommends approval of this variation request, as described in Finding 7 of the staff report. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the first floor plan of the 2 multifamily buildings which are proposed in this project. The layout of the buildings and their architecture will be reviewed with a detailed site plan. And as the plan shown here is schematic in nature, the layout may also change between now and review of that detailed site plan. However, staff did identify some potential issues with the building layout shown, which will have to be evaluated further with a detailed site plan. The 2 buildings are proposed on either side of an existing one-way loading ramp, which provides the exit to an underground consolidated storage facility located beneath the mall. Traffic exiting the storage facility will pass between the 2 buildings onto Toledo Road Extended. With the detailed site plan, the applicant should pay special attention to the issues raised by the close proximity of the residential and commercial uses. Consideration should also be given to the long-term use of the space currently occupied by the loading ramp, as future redevelopment on the mall site may cause it to be removed. The 2 buildings together occupy approximately 650 feet of space east of the northwest mall entrance. However, the TDO design standards include a maximum block length of 500 feet. At the time of detailed site plan, the applicant will have to demonstrate conformance to the maximum block length required, or obtain a modification to the TDO standards. Next slide, please. This slide shows the conceptually proposed massing of the 2 multifamily buildings, as viewed from the northwest. The northwest site entrance is in the bottom right of the image, and Toledo Road Extend is located just left of the buildings. Next slide, please. This slide shows the conceptually proposed building massing from the northeast. Next slide, please. Because residential development is proposed, mandatory dedication parkland is required with the preliminary plan application, pursuant to Section 24-134 of the prior subdivision regulations. The applicant is proposing to meet the requirement with private on-site recreational facilities within the multifamily buildings, as permitted by Section 24-135B. Staff supports the use of on-site recreational facilities for the new multifamily buildings proposed with this application. However, the TDDP does include proposed park facilities on and near the mall site, as shown in this slide. Staff found that provision of land for these park facilities will need to be addressed with future development applications, which propose development where the park facilities are shown in the TDDP. Next slide, please. The TDDP also includes specific recommendations for Toledo Road Extended, which are illustrated with the street section on this slide. The TDDP envisions Toledo Road Extended as a two-lane roadway with on-street parking and bike lanes. However, it also stipulates that the facilities provided between the curbs are at the discretion of the City of Hyattsville. The TDO requires a frontage zone on either side of the roadway, which must be a minimum of 20 feet in depth, and include within that depth a buffer zone, tree and furniture zone, sidewalk clear zone, and retail zone. Where no retail zone is proposed along the street, as is in this case, the retail zone is simply the remaining area between the clear zone and the building facade. Next slide, please. This slide shows the street section for Toledo Road Extended proposed by the applicant. The facilities between the street curbs, which include 2 travel lanes and a bike lane, have received approval by the City of Hyattsville. The frontage zone, with the staff recommended modifications, will include all of the subzones required by the TDO. The applicant may still request a reduction in the minimum frontage zone depth at the time of detailed site plan from 20 feet to 18 feet, and if so, this street section will be able to accommodate such a reduction. With this project, the street section shown here will be established only for the frontage of the new multifamily buildings on Parcel 2. However, staff expects that this street section will also be used for future development along Toledo Road Extended, east of the multifamily buildings. Redevelopment of the property to the north of the mall will have to provide the frontage zone on the north side of Toledo Road Extended, and as such redevelopment may also provide additional width to the travelway. Next slide, please. Because the new street section will only be established for the frontage of the new multifamily buildings on Parcel 2, the applicant has proposed, and staff has recommended, additional interim improvements to Toledo Road Extended on Parcel 1 in order to ensure functionality of the roadway, while redevelopment of the rest of the road is still in the future. The applicant proposed changes to the stop signs near the northwest entrance, and staff has recommended sharrows along the roadway where the bike lane is not yet to be implemented. Staff has also recommended that all existing center lines, speed bumps, and crosswalks be restriped. Functionality of the roadway should be further established with the previously discussed queuing and operational analysis, which are recommended to be done with a detailed site plan. The proposed and recommended improvements in the northwest area of the site are conceptually illustrated on this slide. Next slide, please. The staff recommended improvements in the northeast area of the site are conceptually illustrated on this slide. Note that the sharrows on Parcel 1, the bike lane in front of Parcel 2, and the frontage zone on Parcel 2 are also recommended to meet the requirements of on-site bicycle and pedestrian adequacy in centers, pursuant to Section 24-124.01 of the Power Subdivision Regulations. Off-site improvements for bicycle and pedestrian adequacy required by Section 24-124.01 have also been proposed by the applicant and are found acceptable by staff. I will read a modified condition to the record which addresses all the required off-site and on-site BPIS improvements. Next slide, please. In conclusion, subdivision staff recommends that the planning board adopt the findings and approve preliminary plan subdivision 4-21032 Hyattsville Crossing, as well as a variation from Section 24-121A3, subject to conditions contained in the staff report. The applicant communicated proposed revisions to the conditions of approval recommended in the report, which are included on the record. As stated in the beginning of this presentation, staff was not in agreement with all of the proposed revisions. However, staff and the applicant worked to determine additional revisions which were acceptable to both the applicant and staff. I will read those into the record now. Staff recommends that Condition 1A read as follows. 1. Prior to signature approval of the preliminary plan of subdivision, the plan shall be revised as follows. A. Increase the width of the public access easement along the northern border of Parcel 2 from 25 feet to 38 feet. The public access easement on Parcel 1 shall be expanded or modified as needed to ensure the existing interim drive aisles from Bellcrest Road to Parcel 2 are also encompassed by the easement. The area of future dedication to the City of Hyattsville may remain delineated at 25 feet wide. Condition 10 should read as follows. Prior to approval of building permits for residential development, the applicant and the applicant's heirs, successors, and/or assignees shall submit a performance bond, letter of credit, or other suitable financial guarantee for construction of recreational facilities. Note that that is the language that's in the staff report. Staff simply deleted the applicant's requested edit to this condition. Condition 13 should read as follows. Prior to approval of any residential building permit for the subject property, the applicant and the applicant's heirs, successors, and/or assignees shall demonstrate that the following required off-site and on-site adequate pedestrian and bikeway facilities have A, full financial assurances, B, have been permitted for construction through the applicable operating agency's access permit process, and C, have an agreed upon timetable for construction and completion with the appropriate operating agency in accordance with the applicant's bicycle and pedestrian impact statement submission, or BPIS submission, and Section 24-124.01 of the Prince George's County Subdivision Regulations. A, off-site improvements. Romanet 1. Upgrade 5 existing bus stops to include shelters and benches at locations displayed in Exhibit 2D, 3B, and 4B of applicant's BPIS submission. Romanet 2. Upgrade the median crossing at Maryland 410, or East-West Highway, and Edgeworth Park Drive to provide adequate space to install a crosswalk across the entirety of Maryland 410, as shown on Exhibit 2CI of the BPIS submission. Romanet 3. Upgrade 12 street ramps and crosswalks to Americans with Disabilities Act standards along Nicholson Street, as shown on Exhibit 6A to 6D of the BPIS submission. B, on-site improvements. Romanet 1. Provide a 4-foot bicycle lane on Toledo Road Extend along its frontage on Parcel 2. Romanet 2. Provide a buffer zone, tree and furniture zone, and sidewalk clear zone within the frontage zone along Toledo Road Extended on Parcel 2, with the width of the zones to be determined at the time of detailed site plan. Romanet 3. Provide shared roadway markings, or sharrows, on Toledo Road Extended along its frontage on Parcel 1. Condition 14 should read as follows. Prior to acceptance of the detailed site plan, additional analyses as outlined below shall be provided to determine if alternate development results in the need for the following improvements. A, an existing observational queuing analysis and a calculated queue analysis with future traffic conditions to determine if a median connection between the two medians along the eastbound approach of the intersection of Toledo Road Extend, and Bellcrest Road is needed in order to restrict the existing access driveway immediately west of this intersection, or other alternative improvements to prevent the stacking of vehicles and blocking of the intersection. B, an operational analysis of Toledo Road Extended at its intersection with Toledo Terrace to determine if a free-flowing right turn lane is needed at the westbound approach to prevent queuing along Toledo Road Extended, with the additional improvements to this intersection provided in Condition 15. The details and design of the intersection improvements shall be shown on the detailed site plan prior to its acceptance, and any improvements deemed necessary shall be provided in conjunction with the fine grading permit for Parcel 2. Condition 15 should read as follows. Prior to the approval of the fine grading permit for the residential development on Parcel 2, the applicant and the applicant's heirs, successors, and/or assignees shall include the following improvements at the intersection of Toledo Road Extended / Toledo Place / Toledo Terrace within the permit drawings and shall be implemented in conjunction with the fine grading of Parcel 2. A, provide a stop sign at the southbound left movement located between Toledo Terrace and Toledo Road Extended. B, provide a stop sign and stop bar at the northbound approach of the intersection of Toledo Road Extended / Toledo Place / Toledo Terrace. C, remove the stop bar and stop sign at the eastbound approach of the intersection of Toledo Road Extended / Toledo Place / Toledo Terrace. These improvements shall be shown on the detailed site plan submission prior to its acceptance. Finally, Condition 16 should read as follows. Prior to the approval of the fine grading permit for the residential development on Parcel 2, the applicant and the applicant's heirs, successors, and/or assignees shall include in the plans the restriping of all existing center lines, speed bumps, and crosswalks along Toledo Road Extended. A restriping plan for these improvements shall be provided as part of the detailed site plan prior to its acceptance. These improvements will be implemented in conjunction with the fine grading of Parcel 2. The findings in the staff report associated with these conditions will also be edited for the resolution. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Let me turn to my fellow board members, see if you have any questions for staff.
I just have some clarifying questions with regards to the revised conditions, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Diaz-Campbell, I think I followed you fairly succinctly, but I just want to make sure that the following conditions are the ones you just read into the record and are revised. That would be condition number 1. And I'm as a guide, I'm using applicant exhibit number 1. Okay. So that would be new condition number 1 is read into the record. Condition number 10 stays as part of your original staff report. New condition 13 and all the associated sub-bullets as you read into the record. Clarification there, applicant exhibit number 1 struck conditions 13B, 13C, D, E, and F. Are you in agreement with those strikes or?
Yes, we are in agreement with those strikes.
Okay, and then new condition 14 is read into the record, and then condition 15 along with the associated sub-bullets as you read into the record, and then condition 16 is read into the record. Is that correct?
The only correction I would make to that is that for condition 1, the only sub-item that is changing is the 1A. The other sub-items of condition 1 will remain the same.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
and everything else is correct.
Thank you so much. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Washington. Helpful clarification. Other questions?
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
have no question.
No
Commissioner
questions from Commissioner Dorner?
Yeah, I do. Just to clarify, because I think this was, to me, this was a little bit confusing that we don't have something sitting in front of us. Because I'm looking at like a little tablet screen and trying to go back and forth between the slides and the staff report, the staff slides, and applicant exhibit 1. So I just want to be clear that in striking condition 13 B, or sorry, 13 C, D, E, and F, those are now subsumed into 13B as 1, 2, and 3, right?
Yes, all of the condition 13, C, D, E, and F, those requirements have essentially been relocated into other conditions.
Okay, and then condition 13C originally is now 13A3, I think?
Correct.
Okay.
Romanet 3.
And
Yeah.
going on to condition 15A, which was eliminated, I don't think that was actually put back in anywhere, or am I wrong? And if I'm correct, then why was it struck, or why does staff feel that it's not necessary now?
So yes, that one was not put back in. That one was replaced with the new recommended condition 14, which is the recommendation for the queuing analyses. So essentially, the raised triangle island, it may be the correct solution for that intersection, but the applicant would like a chance to determine if there is another solution that would work, and we are willing to give them the chance to make that analysis.
Okay. So then my only other request, and I don't know if you would clarify it or if the applicant would speak to it later, but in the 4-foot bicycle lane for Toledo Road right there, I'm tired of having sharrows that are unprotected, and especially in this area. If you bike down that street or down Queensbury, like all this like TVVP kind of areas, it's extremely dangerous as a biker. You're gonna get clipped. People have come right next to me as I've been biking, even with my son on my bike behind me, and come extremely close. So I'm tired of just having unprotected sharrows there. I want to see painting on this area, on the street, and I would like to see, it's extremely easy, but to have some kind of a barrier, whether it's like a couple inches where you've got kind of like the plastic sort of reflectors like on the street, or actually the white kind of like plastic reflectors that a car could run over them, but so it's not going to get damaged if it actually hits it. But it provides a visual sort of distinction between the bikes within there. And I know that conflicts a little bit with the slide that's up here, because if you have those reflectors that are risen, if you're kind of driving over them to park, then you would run right over those reflectors. But I'm positive we can figure out a way to have less sort of obstructions in there that would also protect bikers from getting killed in this area. Because as we put more and more residential in here, and I assume that this mall parking lot is going to redevelop in other ways as well, like has been sort of envisioned for the past 10 years by the city and by others and by the mall owner. We need to protect the pedestrians who are walking and who are biking within this area. And there are lots of examples of how this can take place if you go into DC or other kind of more pedestrian and biker friendly areas. And one of the things that we have to start focusing on isn't just equity of kind of income and socioeconomic things around the TDP areas throughout the county, but also pedestrian and biker and other kind of safety for those who are walking. Because we can't just build higher density areas, bring a ton of people into here, and then have them get run over by cars in these locations. Like, we have to have a more fulsome focus on this and start to have better paintings in this areas and more protections for folks in these places. And I know Mr. Haller is probably, this is falling on deaf ears in some way, because I've told him this multiple times, or he's heard this. And I had him do the sharrows that are leading into the bridge by the K-Freets development. Those are great. But even when I go in that area over by K-Freets, which is farther away from here, and it's not necessarily transit oriented, but it's getting closer to the College Park Metro, I've still had cars come really close to me. So we need to really prioritize the biker safety and figure out a way that we can do it well. And then we can take that model and put it into other TDP areas and denser areas as well. So I would push staff to make an effort to figure out what would be the best solutions in there, and I'll leave that open to you. But paint and reflectors on there, or some kind of a plastic barriers or some other way to do that, would be, I think, the way to go as we try and bring more people into here. Now, I don't know if you have any ideas right away, Mr. Diaz-Campbell, or if you want to kind of pause on that and think about it, and the applicant can address it. But we've got to do a better job at these bike lanes when we're getting closer to metros.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Dorner. In response to that, I would just point out that the sharrows are really a temporary solution for the part of a development on Parcel 1 that is not proposed to really be redeveloped with this particular preliminary plan application. In the future, as we see more development come in, we would expect that the bike lane in front of Parcel 2 would be extended all the way to the intersection of Toledo Road and Bellcrest Road. Right now the portion of the Toledo Road extended that's on Parcel 1, it's an existing drive aisle. It's functioning in such a way to serve the existing commercial mall facilities. The sharrows are really to help bicyclists get to Parcel 2, but in the long term, I do think that we'll have the bike lane will help achieve the bicycle safety you're looking for.
Yeah, and I understand this is temporary, but somebody dying is also permanent. So I think we need to have at least a painting on these areas that is a little bit better, and make sure it's there. It's cheap to put in plastic barriers or reflectors and these different things that can add additional safety. You can't bring back somebody if they get hit by a car and die. So I think we need to definitely prioritize that as we're going through, because that would be the worst thing for our county as we're trying to prioritize TDDP and denser kind of developments in these areas. If we all of a sudden get in the news because people are dying around our metros when we're bringing in these fantastic kind of developments. So I realize that it's temporary, but I think there are also temporary solutions or cheap ones that can be put in place in the meantime to elevate the safety in these areas. Because I've almost been hit in this area, and I bike through these areas, and I run through those areas, and it's not great all the time, and we need to make sure that we're thinking about other people's and not just cars driving through these locations.
I appreciate your comments, and I share them. I'm quite familiar with this area, and I have lots of the same concerns and questions. One thing to note, since this will become a City of Hyattsville road, the representative of the city may have some thoughts about this as well, even about how we approach this in the interim, as you're describing. So when we get to that, I'm curious to hear her thoughts and reactions as well.
Okay, and I'll pause there.
Chair,
Talk about it then.
You're okay, Commissioner Doran?
I do have a question.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Yeah, just real quick, has the city of Hyattsville had sufficient time to look at all of these changes that were made in the conditions? That's a concern I have.
Mr.
Yeah,
Gerald,
it's a good
I'll
question.
jump in here real quick. I just want to let the board know that I did transmit copies of the revised conditions that were worked out with staff to the city yesterday. They indicated to me that they were in agreement with them, but Ms. Roby is on today as well and can also address you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haller.
Thank you. We'll come to that in a minute. Thank you, Commissioner Giraldo. Other questions from commissioners? I have a few. I'm curious about, Mr. Diaz-Campbell, the intersection of, I mean, the short of it is along Toledo Road on the back. It's not a safe place right now. And one of the big problems is there's a bunch of fence cut-throughs from the neighboring property. I know that's not the subject property, it's the adjacent property, but what it leads to is people in a very invisible way, because of the landscaping and fencing there, folks step into that roadway all the time. And I'm wondering how much that was a part of this discussion. I'll ask you first, Mr. Diaz-Campbell, but I'll come to that with the applicants as well, and how you plan on addressing that with what's in your control.
So I would not say it was a large part of the discussion. That would also, those crossings are also a temporary condition, and we would expect that in the long term that that northern property will also redevelop. And when it does, it would have to provide the same sort of frontage zone that this project is going to provide along parcel 2. So that includes the buffer zone, the tree and furnishing zone, the sidewalks, the sidewalk clear zone. So in the long term, you get a sidewalk parallel to the street rather than crossings with no crosswalks that just dead end in that street.
So I'd like to see some kind of, through this process, I'd like to see some kind of temporary solution, just as Commissioner Dorner was talking about, with perhaps a slightly more robust temporary solution with the bike safety, but the same thing with the pet safety. And I'm thinking specifically of folks coming in out of the garden apartments off the back, because as we make this road more automobile friendly as well as bike friendly, where we really may be setting up the pedestrians coming off the backside for an even less safe situation. So I'll leave it at that. I want to hear what the applicant has to say about that too as we move forward. But let me see if there's any more questions for staff from my fellow commissioners. Okay, hearing none, I will turn it over to the applicant. Would you like the representative of the City of Hyattsville to go first, Mr. Haller? How do you want to proceed?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I'll proceed first, and then we can have Ms. Roby address the planning board. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Thomas Haller on behalf of Avalon Bay. As with Mr. Gibbs and Mr. Tedesco, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to welcome you back to, well, not back to the county, but welcome you to the planning board. I'm looking forward to working with you and presenting cases to you as we move forward, and congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
The subdivision application that's before you today is actually the first step of truly making the mall at Prince George's a mixed-use development. And I'm excited today to be representing Avalon Bay. Avalon Bay is a great partner in beginning this journey. They are the 15th largest publicly traded real estate investment trust and have been on this S&P 500 since 2007. It's a vertically integrated company, meaning that they not only do the in-house development planning, but they also construct the project and they also manage the project once it's constructed. So they're a good partner to start this, the introduction of residential uses around the mall property. And the conversion of the mall to a mixed-use development has been something that's been envisioned since the first Transit District Development Plan was adopted in 1992. So it's literally been 30 years to achieve this this dream. So we're excited to be here and be a part of this. I do want to thank Mr. Diaz-Campbell and the rest of your staff for your assistance in working through the issues. I also want to thank the City of Hyattsville. We've worked closely with them because, as the staff report notes, the TDDP looks for Toledo Road Extended to be a municipal street. And so we have worked with them to establish a standard to meet their requirements as well. And we look forward to continuing to work with them in the future. We have worked with staff to work through a few concerns we have with the conditions, and Mr. Diaz-Campbell read into the record the conditions which we all have agreed to, and so we don't have any issues with that. I do want to address a couple of the points that were raised earlier. Commissioner Durner, you've raised a good point, and I would note that condition 16, which is been slightly revised mostly as to implementation, requires that so just for the boards to set the stage, Toledo Road currently dead ends at Bellcrest Road. There's an existing driveway aisle, as most of the board members are aware, that runs along the entire northern boundary of this property, and then exits at Toledo Terrace. So it's basically part of a ring road for the mall. It will become a new municipal street. We will be improving that street in accordance with the City of Hyattsville standards in front of Parcel 2, and as the rest of the mall redevelops, it will be completed over time. But condition 16 is in place to require the portion of the ring road along the northern property line that's not being improved as a public street at this point to have existing center lines, speed bumps, crosswalks repainted, and to establish a clear vehicular pathway and pedestrian pathway throughout our bicycle pathway throughout the site. So what I would suggest to address Mr. Durner's concern is that maybe we add a finding that at the time of detailed site plan, we provide a copy of a plan that shows how it's going to be restriped and addressed, so that the concerns that you raised about making sure that we accommodate both bicycles as well as pedestrians is addressed in the interim restriping and not just in the future condition. I think that would be something that would give us an opportunity to take a closer look at it. Keep in mind that Avalon Bay does not own the overall mall. Andre Gingles is here today representing the owner of the mall, which is Preet, and so he can speak to this as well. But my suggestion would be that we have that striping plan also take into account by accommodating bicycles by more than just necessarily putting sharrows on the existing mall pavement. And then with regard to Commissioner Shapiro's question about the northern property line, I think that the fencing and the openings in that, I think the fencing is actually on the adjoining property, and I think the openings in the fence are probably self-created by residents of that development. I think we can work with Preet to see if we can find an interim solution of maybe a fence that we would control. I know that over time, the goal is for that property to redevelop and to create a new street with buildings on either side. So it would not be a permanent solution by any means, but I think that's something else that we could look at the time of detailed site plan to see if that might be a possibility. And so I would think that maybe a finding that would ask us to explore the possibility of doing that to make sure that we can do that in a manner that is respectful of property lines, but also doesn't hinder any of the long-term goals of the mall as well. So I think we can address both of those comments as we move forward, as this is just a preliminary plan of subdivision. But I think that both of those issues are well taken, and we can address those as we move forward. I'm going to stop at this point and offer to answer any questions that you have, and give you an opportunity to hear from Mr. Gingles and Ms. Roby as well.
Okay, questions for Mr. Haller before we proceed to Mr. Gingles and Ms. Roby? Hearing none.
Mr. Chairman, may I make some corrections to my previous comments?
Yes, Mr. Diaz-Campbell.
Okay, so first of all, those connections from the property to the north, those actually are formalized. There's basically little brick posts in the wall on either side of landscaping, on either side of the sidewalk that comes from the multifamily buildings. So it's not just holes in a chain link fence or anything like that. And there are existing crosswalks from those connections that lead into the mall property. However, they're not in great shape. So condition 16, it recommends restriping of those crosswalks, which will allow them to become a lot more visible and ideally a lot more safer as well. Some of the speed bumps that are supposed to be restriped are also located near those crosswalks. I'd also add that our transportation planning staff is here if the commissioners have any further questions on the bicycle and pedestrian recommendations.
Thank you for that. Let me build off that, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Take a moment because I do have a question, and perhaps it's for transportation staff. In my lay analysis, the thing to do would be to raise the crosswalks at those pedestrian crossings and have those serve as the speed bumps. I just don't know. I don't know how expensive an item that is, but anything you can do to make it clear that lots of families and kids cross across that in a pretty invisible way all the time. So perhaps I would, let me hear from transportation staff to hear additional thoughts about this, because I'm really worried about it. And Mr. Haller, I get your point about the timing of this, but this is an opportunity to talk about it. I'm going to take advantage of it.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is Will Capers. I am the Transportation Planning Supervisor for the Planning Department. Yes, as
We can hear you. Not anymore.
Sorry, I'm having audio issues. Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. We can hear you fine.
Yes, as Mr. Diaz-Campbell indicated, we did add a condition that any of the existing striping that's currently on the drive aisle be restriped to make it more visible. We did look into the crossing issue, and we wanted to ensure that as this property continues to develop, we will look into the safest measures into allowing pedestrian crossings across the street. We just want to keep in mind that we do not want to continue to provide additional crosswalks, because we will essentially be leading pedestrians to the property to the north into the parking lot. So we will continue to consider your recommendations as this property develop, and as Mr. Diaz-Campbell indicated, the crosswalks that are there, we ask that the applicant restripe them so they could become more visible.
Thank you, Mr. Capers. I appreciate that.
So just one comment on that. On leading pedestrians from the north into the crosswalks or into the parking lot, that's actually exactly what Mr. Gingles can talk about what the REIT's trying to do, but that's actually exactly what was envisioned years ago by the city of Hyattsville. And Ms. Roby may not have been around by then, so I don't know if you're aware, but the redevelopment of the mall area was to actually make two areas kind of coming around the food court area, going north to south to allow pedestrian traffic to go through there. So I think that's actually planned. It's not that we're trying to prevent that. That's actually the vision. So people would come through the mall area to down to there and go south down to the metro, or if they're coming out of the metro area, as they come out and they're going north, they're going to open up into that mall area right there. So I think we need to kind of actually take that into consideration, because that was the intention years ago, long-term kind of plan of developing that mall.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So we are still with the applicant. Yeah.
Just ask Mr. Fowler. I think this is not related necessarily to this case, but I believe that you actually are the attorney for the multifamily property that's on Toledo Road and Bellcrest right there. That's redeveloping in that zone. If we have improvements along these roads that are working with Mr. Gingles in terms of striping and other safety measures, I would ask that you also consider that for your other property. I know this is outside of the sort of legal requirements, but in thinking about making this area consistent, it'd be unfortunate if you have these like really nice restripings and improvements right along Toledo road area and this new kind of wraparound kind of road that we have as it's being improved, and then not continue over to Toledo Road, because that takes people to the library. And that takes people to one of our community centers. And that takes you actually to a trail that you can cut all the way east and go back to the Cape Freats and to some of your other developments across Route 1. So I'm viewing this as kind of like a bigger picture thing that we need to make sure we're coordinating on multiple projects as we're improving these things.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that comment.
Okay, so Mr. Haller, we're going to turn to Mr. Gingles and Ms. Roby. Start with Mr. Gingles.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. First of all, congratulations, welcome aboard, and best wishes for a great tenure.
Thank you.
Just one, so Pennsylvania Real Estate Investment Trust is the owner of the mall. We appreciate working with Avalon Bay and others, particularly your staff, and sort of getting to where we are today. I would just concur with both of the suggestions that Mr. Haller made about looking at how, as a part of the DSP, to implement some additional measures that would make both the biking and the crosswalks a bit safer. One of those could include looking at some interim fencing along the mall property. I do think, as the commissioner was indicating, that those were sort of there to bring that traffic into the mall, and we do want that. Over time, as the development occurs along there, I think, particularly with buildings becoming there and using the established crosswalks, it will end up directing more people directly to those crosswalks, because there will be buildings there and it just won't be the same ability to just sort of cross anywhere along the street, which will probably enhance the safety. With that, we agree with the conditions that have been revised. They've taken into consideration those concerns that have been raised by the owner. And other than that, I or Mr. Dan Pascal, who's also on the line, can answer any additional questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Gingles. Questions from commissioners for Mr. Gingles, who represents the Pennsylvania Real Estate Investment Trust, the owner of the mall? Anything? Okay, thank you. Turn to Ms. Roby from the City of Hyattsville.
Yes, good morning, Chairman Shapiro, members of the Planning Board. For the record, my name is Taylor Roby. I'm the City Planner for the City of Hyattsville, and I'm here to represent the city regarding this preliminary plan of subdivision 4-2032. Our City Council reviewed this case on Monday, March 7th, 2020, and voted in support of the applicant's proposed preliminary plan of subdivision application, subject to the following conditions. We'd like to see the site plan amended to reflect a 2-foot variance in the total frontage minimum depth requirement to accommodate other improvements between the building facade and right-of-way. The intent of this variance is to provide adequate width to support 2 10-foot travel lanes, vehicle travel lanes, as well as 4 feet of pavement between the tree and furniture zone to be allocated to a bike lane. The second being, while Toledo Road Extended is at this interim condition, we'd like to see a public access easement granted over the improved portion of the roadway. And then lastly, while the entirety of Toledo Road Extended between Toledo Terrace and Bellcrest Road is improved to a public standard with the conditions outlined, the applicant must file a confirmatory deed stating that the roadway is to be publicly dedicated to the city of Hyattsville, and upon inspection and approval by the city of Hyattsville. We feel that these conditions balance the interim condition of Toledo Road Extended with the longer-term vision outlined in the 2016 approved Prince George's Plaza TDDP. These conditions have been conveyed to the applicant, and we believe that they are reflected in the staff report that Eddie has talked through. Thank you for your time and consideration of our comments, and we look forward to your decision.
Thank you, Mr. Roby. So, quick question, Mr. Haller, Mr. Gingles, are the conditions that Ms. Roby is describing, those are conditions that you have incorporated into the conditions that you and staff have agreed to?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We modified our plans after the city of Hyattsville meeting to reflect the city's concerns, and they are also reflected in the staff's recommended conditions as revised.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Fellow commissioners, questions for Ms. Roby, City of Hyattsville? Okay, thank you. Thank you all very much. Anything else, Mr. Haller, from you or your team? Mr. Gingles?
Mr. Chairman, no, I do want to thank Mr. Diaz Campbell for mentioning the access points from the property to the north, and I did take a quick look while he was addressing you. So there are a combination of fencing, hedges, and there are formalized openings along that northern property line that are demarcated by brick piers connected to sidewalks. So obviously a very intentional method of connecting the existing residences there to the mall property. And I do agree with Mr. Capers that the condition as written and as we've agreed to, condition 16 will have us evaluate, formalize those crosswalks so that they can be accommodated and better marked for as we develop our site. So I think that does address a lot of your concerns about access from pedestrians.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, if we have no further questions from any fellow commissioners.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Could I ask for a point of clarification? It's David Warner, Principal Counsel.
Yes, Mr. Warner.
Commissioner Dorner, in discussing the improvements that would be appropriate for Toledo Road Extended, mentioned that he felt that painting at least reflectors would be better. The finding that Mr. Haller offered was to bring forward the restriping and painting improvements as part of the detailed site plan, but it didn't mention the reflectors. And I just wanted to clarify if that was also part of Mr. Haller's proposed finding, if that was what Mr. Dorner was seeking, just so when we prepare the resolution, we accurately reflect that.
Thank you, Mr. Haller. Any objection to including reflectors in that condition?
No, I do not. I don't believe we have any objection to that. Are you okay with that, Mr. Gingles?
Also okay, yes.
Okay. All right, so let's consider that as part of the conditions. Thank you, Mr. Warner. If there are no further questions, I want to thank everybody. And let me turn it over to my commissioners to see if there is a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff in addition to the findings that will need to be modified as a result of the changes in conditions, in addition to the two findings offered by Mr. Haller with regards to safety of pedestrians and cyclists, specifically to include reflectors and striping. And with that, approve preliminary plan 4-21032 and variation from section 24-121A3, along with the associated conditions as outlined in staff's report and is modified by applicant exhibit number 1, and is further modified by staff and is read into the record as follows. Condition number 1A, condition number 10 shall remain as originally presented in staff's report. Condition 13, as well as the sub-bullets as read into the record by staff. Condition 14, as read into the record by staff. Condition 15, as well as the sub-bullets as read into the record by staff. And condition 16 is read into the record by staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Washington. Thorough as always. Thank you very much. Is there a second to the motion?
Dorner seconds.
We have Commissioner Dorner with a second. I think we had Commissioner Giraldo with a muted second, but Commissioner Dorner beat him to the punch. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye, unmuted.
We have an unmuted aye, and I vote aye as well. The vote is 4-0. Thank you all very much. Let me just say, pick up on where you started with this, Mr. Howard. This is a very, very exciting project, an example of really quality infill development. It has the potential to be quite transformative for the city and for the region. And yes, this is something that has been in the works for many, many, many years. And I personally very excited to see us moving in this direction. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have one more item on our agenda. I do not know how long we're going to be taking on this one item, and I'm wondering if we need any kind of a break.
I am wondering with you. I think that'd be a great idea.
Okay.
I'm wondering.
Let me ask, do we want to take a short bio break, or do we want to take a longer lunchish break? Hold on one sec. At what? At 1, okay. Okay, so we're doing a bio break. We're doing the short bio break. So let's be back at 5 after noon.
Perfect.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Final item before us. This is item 7 on our agenda. This is a preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21030 Preserve at Piscataway, Bailey's Village. We have participating in this case. Imagine this for staff. We have Mr. Diaz-Campbell. We have Mr. Gingles, who's the attorney for the applicant. We also have Mr. Amirpour, Ms. Amirpour, my apologies, with the development group. There are some additional backup materials that were received prior to the Tuesday noon deadline that are part of the record. There's the proposed revisions to conditions. There's also a memo to planning board regarding continuance and other issues. There's also the referral memo from DPI, as well as a public safety mitigation plan. So those are all part of the record. Let me turn it over to Mr. Diaz-Campbell to begin the staff presentation.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, I am Eddie Diaz-Campbell, Senior Planner with the Subdivision Section. Item number 7 on the agenda is the preliminary plan of subdivision for the Preserve at Piscataway, Bailey's Village, 4-21030. The subject project proposes 26 lots and 6 parcels for the development of 26 townhouse dwelling units. The site is subject to a prior comprehensive design plan, CDP-9306, which was last submitted as CDP-9306-05 in January 2022 for the purpose of allowing the proposed townhouse use. As stated in the supplemental staff memo within the additional backup, staff's recommendation is for continuance of the case to next Thursday, April 28th. This recommendation is being made because on April 11th, the District Council voted to request that an order of denial be written for the comprehensive design plan amendment associated with the project, CDP-9306-05, It is not currently known whether the order of denial will reverse the planning board's decision on CDP-9306-05 or recommend another course of action. For that reason, staff is recommending the board delay its action by 1 week to the last day in the case's mandatory 70-day action period in order to ensure its decision has the full benefit of the district council's decision, should it by then be released. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Questions for Mr. Diaz-Campbell? If not, I'll turn it over to the applicant, Mr. Gingles.
Good afternoon. For the record, Andre Gingles, attorney with offices in Laurel, Maryland. So the revised recommendation also accompanies a set of responses to the proposed conditions by the applicant, as well as a new condition. With regard to the revised recommendation, we disagree only with the suggestion of a continuance. We cannot, and actually we're on this date because some months ago I did express to Mr. Diaz-Campbell that I was going to be out of the country. And so the continuance to the additional date, which would be at the end of the 70-day period, causes issues in that it would mean that our preliminary plan would either be automatically approved with no conditions, and that's typically not what the planning board does. Being out of the country has been long planned. It's nothing that I can sort of reverse at this time. Secondarily, we would just note that notwithstanding what the district council may do, and we do understand that there was a request for the preparation of the order of disapproval. We're not sure what action is going to be taken on that, but that your existing recommendation, as well as the revised recommendation, included a condition number 9, which does address if the district council should do anything different than approving the comprehensive design plan as was previously approved by the planning board. For those reasons, and the fact that you've made the findings in both the original and the modified staff report that are required for the approval of the preliminary plan, we think it's detrimental to the applicant for us not to be able to go forward within the statutory time limit that's allowed. And we will have various rights that we can perceive depending on what the district council's action is. All that being said, we think that the recommendation, with the exception of the continuance, continues to protect the planning board. And at the same time, the only risk is really upon the applicant. For that reason, we ask that the revised recommendation with those conditions as proposed by the staff be adopted and the preliminary plan be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Gingles. So let me start, commissioners. I think it's hard for me to imagine that it is in our best interest to move forward without complete information, without hearing from the district council. And I also hear you, Mr. Gingles, around this issue around, it's a reality. You have this scheduled vacation. You're not going to be there. It's not in the interest of the client to move forward without your presence. My understanding is that we might have another option here too, which is with your support, and Mr. Warner, you can help me with this, but with your support, if you request an additional extension, a waiver for another 70 days, then that solves that problem. Because and I imagine we will be fine with that, and then that will provide you the opportunity to participate. But I don't believe that we should move forward unless we have all the information before us. So first of all, let me ask you, actually, let me see before I even ask you, Mr. Gingles, let me just check with my fellow commissioners if you feel like if that's okay with Mr. Gingles, is that okay with you?
I wanted to hear from Mr. Warner, so I'm glad that you spoke with him. I'm fine with continuing this case, provided that meets Mr. Gingles' wishes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was going to defer to also hearing from Mr. Warner, because I think as Mr. Gingles said, if no action can be taken then the preliminary plan, my understanding is it becomes approved without any conditions if we take no action. Is that correct?
Is there a question for Mr. Warner?
Yep.
Yes. Or
At the end of a 70-day, let's let Mr. Warner respond for you.
okay.
Right. Well, if this case were the David Warner Principal Counsel, if this case were continued to your next meeting, it would be permissible to still adopt conditions if we so chose. But given Mr. Gingles' situation, and you know, Mr. Gingles does not have to be here, but obviously in the best interest of the applicant, they wish him to be so. So the best option is for Mr. Gingles to consent to a waiver that will allow him to participate when he's again available, presumably in May.
Yeah, that kind of gets at my question. I guess that's what is the waiver permissible? I mean, can we do it? I mean, it's really the chair's initial question. So
It's two things. So one, you have the unilateral right to continue this case to next Thursday, because that's still within the 70-day limit. Your procedures allow you to recess this hearing and continue it to the 28th. But the 28th is our 70-day limit. So we have to take action by then, unless the applicant consents in writing to extend the period for another 70 days. So we can continue to next week. And that's the first recommendation that staff is making. And then with Mr. Gingles' consent, we can extend to a date after that, if he's willing. I'll just give a little bit of the background. This is a situation that occurs from time to time when a previous approval hasn't completed its approval process before the next approval comes along. Now, we are required, the planning board is required to find conformity of this preliminary plan to the CDP. Right now, that CDP is CDP 5, the one that you approved. But we have information now that the district council is intending to potentially deny the approval. Reverse would be the right word. And so that would leave us with CDP 4 as the effective CDP that you have to find conformity with. And with that knowledge, your duty, in my opinion, is to make the best decision possible on any preliminary plan. And with this information, that would be appropriate to be considered next week. And if not next week, then with Mr. Gingles' consent at some meeting thereafter.
Fine.
And if Mr. Gingles agreed to the 70-day or the waiver, then he would have more time to deal with staff on some of the issues that are raised. Is that right?
Well, I'm
correct.
Okay.
Other commissioners?
Yeah, I'll chime in and agree with the chair that I think it'd be premature to consider this today, because if it is denied and so the amendment on the CDP doesn't go forward, then the townhomes that are being proposed with this application they're not going to be conformant. So the preliminary plan of subdivision is going to be conflicting with the CDP. That would leave us another choice that we could still hear. So we could recess on this case. We could still hear it next week. Mr. Gingles wouldn't be here. So it'd be a risk on his part. And if it's denied, the application might get denied, and then it stops full force. So I think that's another risk that I'll just mention. It's not a threat or anything. I'm just mentioning, Mr. Gingles, as you're kind of thinking through, like, do you have the ability to extend this, and kind of what are the cost benefits? Like, I think that's a big cost if I were kind of sitting in your seat. So I'd be a little bit weary of doing that. And we could potentially hear part of this stuff and then recess it, and then if everything goes fine and it's not denied, then he doesn't necessarily need to be here. We could finish it out next week. But it's a big gamble.
Yeah. Anything else from commissioners? So I think, Mr. Gingles, consider this a straw poll. But what I'm hearing from my commissioners and where I'm at as well is, I think we're basically saying we see two options. We'll take this up next week, which is problematic for you, or with your concurrence, we'll have an additional waiver, and that gives us the flexibility to hear this when we have all the information and when you're available.
Just a couple other thoughts, and I would like to allow Ms. Amirpour to speak.
Yes, please.
On page 5 of your staff report, the staff makes a finding beginning in the paragraph that starts with on January 6th, 2022. And it notes that as of the writing, what the district council has done, but goes on to note that staff recommends that the PPS can be found to conform, and then indicates that it adds the condition to be addressed and to become applicable should the district council take a different action. And it seems to me that all of that addresses the issue that's being raised. And for that reason, to sort of not at least have something that would conform to both what statutes are in both the subdivision ordinance and the zoning ordinance, so that the applicant is not put in the position that should there be a different decision, it doesn't have to go back and come back on this preliminary plan, but also it then can utilize whatever rights it has should it desire to move forward with a decision by the district council that is detrimental to its interests. That becomes an appellate view to sort of move forward if we decide to take that course. But I would just again note that when you have a recommendation that actually addresses what I believe to be all of the issues, and it indicates in that finding the fact that the preliminary plan has satisfied all of the requirements, is consistent with it's there, and that should there be an action that's detrimental, it simply just indicates what then has to be done with the preliminary plan. The preliminary plan essentially may go away, but to sort of not take an action when we're before you and we've actually met all the requirements, I just think that as the applicant, and I've represented a number of applicants, you want to move forward when you're in the position to move forward. With that, I would just like to hear, allow my client to speak and their views on the subject.
Of course, Ms.
Could I just respond to that before speaks?
Mr. Warner, let's hear from the applicant, and then
okay, sure.
I think this conversation is going to continue. Ms. Amirpour, you're on mute. There we go. Now you're off mute. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. For the record, my name is Nushin Amirpour with Woodlawn Development Group, with the applicant. And we want to thank the staff for working with us on this application also. I want to emphasize again that commercial development is not a desired outcome for this lot, and will face a lot of opposition from the community. Various concepts of retail commercial in combination with multifamily residential was marketed to several developers. There was no interest from the developers because this area has remained rural in character, and they, based on lessons learned, look for more urban environment, the proper human scale grid, and also other retail destinations that people can walk or bike to. So we struck that idea off the list and brainstormed other ideas that fit the character of the area. We engaged a broker to market the site for a daycare, exercise, or learning center, or other type of light commercial use. We kept in mind the importance of bringing in an environmentally and aesthetically compatible operation that residents would want. We could not find anyone that would commit to that idea. We strongly believe that townhouses are compatible to the surrounding, and there is a strong demand for housing in the area, and it will complete the community. We held community presentations, informed, engaged, collaborated all through 2021 with the HOA board and the community, and a letter of support is part of the CDP approval record from the HOA. So, and we plan to make improvements and provide cash contributions towards various amenities throughout the community. Our challenge is that additional time and costs to pursue a basic plan or other processes for a small parcel and the last parcel will make it for us to pursue this plan. With that, I appreciate your time and consideration and your decision.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Amirpour. Appreciate your words. Questions for Ms. Amirpour or any further questions for Mr. Gingles from my colleagues, from fellow commissioners?
Yeah, I've got a question based on those comments. How about putting back in, if we go forward, then the revisions to the conditions under the applicant exhibit is to actually remove one of the findings that any non-residential development should require the approval of a new preliminary plan of subdivision prior to the approval of any building permits. So if there's no intention of making this commercial office or retail, then put that back in, and it would be Mr. Gingles and the applicant's risk to kind of go forward if the county council decides to not approve the amendment, because the only use that you would have essentially would be the townhome within there, and you wouldn't have that, and that would give us potentially a little bit more assurances that we're not approving something and then you get nixed on the townhomes and then you come in and you build commercial and all we have are just our phones ringing off the hooks because residents are upset that you did what's within your legal right, but it wasn't necessarily the intention of what was contemplated.
We actually, and I thought I said this in the beginning, however your staff has phrased the revised recommendation, other than the continuance, we agree with. And so they did indicate that they did not agree with that deletion.
Can you repeat, Mr. Gingles?
So your staff put together a revised recommendation, and it took our proposal for condition revisions, and they concurred with certain ones and did not concur with others. I indicated at the outset that we agree with that staff's revised recommendation, the ones that they concur with and the ones that they don't concur with, so that we would accept that. The only issue that we didn't agree with was the continuance. So as they have placed, and I would just note again, we think that all of that provides all of the protections that would be of any concern.
Thank you. Let me turn to Mr. Warner to pick up where your thoughts were before Ms. Amirpour spoke as well.
Right. I wanted to comment on the conditions added by the staff. Because it is certainly the planning board's prerogative to move forward with this application today, staff had to include conditions in there to address the finding that you might make that this conforms to CDP 05, and then what's going to happen next Tuesday when CDP 05 gets denied. And so if it gets denied, I mean, they've already said it's going to be denied. They just want the order of denial prepared. But you're right. We don't know what it's going to say. So staff did have to address the eventuality that the planning board might decide to hear this case today. But as they've recommended to you, that is not the best option. The best option, based on the information that we've received from the district council, is to evaluate this preliminary plan against the CDP that will be effective presumably next Thursday, not this Thursday. It's just a matter of timing in this case, why this is coming about with this need to continue. But it's really a result of just a timing issue. And really the best, the duty we owe the public as a planning board is to use all of the best information available to us when we make our decision on a preliminary plan, when you make it. And so based on the information we have, the best information is going to be available next week, not today.
Yes, Mr. Warner, I agree that it's in an ideal world, we would wait a week and we would know. And we usually don't have these sorts of situations where we anticipate with pretty good certainty that there's going to be some sort of a denial. We don't know what the denial is going to entail. But I didn't know before the case that Mr. Gingle was going to be out of the country, which is also a problem for him since we're up against the 70-day. So my curiosity, I don't think we should care about the litigation because it's not on us. It's the applicant that would have to go through the appellate process. And today, if we were to take action, I think we can at least protect the public in sort of the public sense or the planning sense from what we anticipate. So if Mr. Mr. Gingle's already said that they're fine with not eliminating that finding number 2, which actually is, I anticipate is probably one of the fears. I know there's a couple of fears. Like one, the preliminary plan subdivision isn't going to be conforming to the CDP if and only if they deny the townhomes. But then, so then you ask the what if? Okay, then if that happens, then what happens? Well, then they go and they build commercial or retail or some other kind of undesired use within this area that we're going to get a lot of phone calls for. But the catch on this is that we've already protected against that because finding number 2 doesn't allow them to build any non-residential. So the only other option would be some sort of other residential use that would be in that area that may not be perfect, but it's also probably not going to bring the profits or sort of business activity that the applicant would necessarily want. So they would probably go through the appellate process. But that's not for us to decide. It's just part of their decision making and what they have to do in this business. So I'm kind of wondering why we would mind, as long as we get those conditions in, where we have finding 2 that's preserved and all the other ones that staff has said that they don't concur with. What would be kind of the risk to us besides this being just like it's unfortunate that we can't wait till like Monday to find out. Or the other option is that we could just hear the case, we could go through all the motions as if we're going to assume that this will be allowed, and then we could recess it until next Thursday as of like with the rules of procedure in section 6. And then we could take the vote, and as long as there's no big impact, then Mr. Gingles doesn't have to worry, he doesn't have to be here, and that would be our sort of final thing. That would also give us an opportunity to add in any other kinds of conditions if there's something other minor we want to kind of add in just to
Well, I see that Ms. Connor's on, so I'd be happy to have her provide her perspective on it as well. But again, I don't think that's appropriate. You're trying to find that this preliminary plan conforms to a CDP that will likely be reversed in 3 or 4 days. You know this, and yet proceeding now and then trying to add a condition that says, well, then if the CDP gets reversed, then such and such will happen, is not the best approach, especially when the subdivision regulations have a process in here that makes it very simple to just have this hearing May 7th or whatever our next date is in May. It's merely an extension of time of 2 weeks to make the decision with the most information when Mr. Gingles can be there. So I don't think I would advise moving forward on this application against staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. So commissioners, hold on, commissioners. I just want to. It's the 4 of us. I think we have all the information. We have the advice of attorney. We have Mr. Gingles, Ms. Arminpour's position on this. let's just discuss which way we want to go on this, the four of us. But I also want to be clear that if we go the route of if Mr. Gingles concurs and we have an additional waiver, that does not mean that this next hearing is, and any action we would take would be 70 days down the road, right?
Exactly.
That's a 70-day window, but we can take this up again. I don't know how long Mr. Gingles' vacation is. I hope it's a good one, Mr. Gingles. But we could take this up again in 2 weeks, Ms. Amanpour. But I believe that it is in our interest that our precedent should be, when we have an opportunity, to make sure that we're working with all the information that we have, and we know that we don't know what's going to happen before the council, district council. It's possible Mr. Gingles could work some magic for his client. We don't have that information. I would want to have all that information before we make a decision. So let me turn to you, fellow board members, and see where you're at. But hold on,
Mr. Chairman, I request a continuance.
Mr. Gingles?
Mr. Chairman, may I request an indefinite continuance to a date to be decided?
You mean a waiver, Mr. Gingles?
I will, in conjunction with that request for a continuance, I will provide a waiver to the planning board.
Okay, and the date determined, you will discuss that with staff. The maximum is 70 days, but we have no need for it to take that long.
I understand, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, fellow commissioners, are any concerns with this approach?
No, I think it's a great approach. And thank you, Mr. Gingles.
Ms. Connor, can you just advise the planning board on the notice situation if this is if we proceed with this approach? Or I can.
Director Checkley, can you weigh in here?
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to point out.
But you're not live yet. Hold on one sec. Hold on one sec, folks. Technical issue, so we can get Director Checkley on.
Can you hear me now?
Not yet.
Yeah. No.
And that picks up. Okay, can you all hear me? Somebody's not there yet?
Yeah.
Yes, great. I just want to remind Mr. Gingles, and I'm sure he thought of this, if you don't pick a date certain today, then the site will have to be reposted with the new date.
If you could give me then just about 60 seconds to look at a calendar and confer with Ms. Amanpour.
Take your time. We'll be waiting. So let's. We don't need to take a break. We can just put ourselves on pause for a few minutes while you do that, Mr. Gingles.
Ms. Amanpour, I can be back in town by the 12th, actually sooner, but I know that you're out of town as well.
Mr. Gingles, you're doing this live on camera. Are you? Is that your intention?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure.
That works for you, Ms. Amanpour? Yes.
Yes, that works.
I will verbally, and if I need to provide this in writing as well, waive the applicant's entitlement to a hearing within 70 days and ask that this hearing be continued to the May 12th agenda, assuming that staff feels that's an open agenda where this could be addressed.
May 12th works. I believe we do need it in writing as well, Mr. Gingles, as verbally. Yes, but I'm looking at staff and I'm getting head nods that May 12th should be fine.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is James Hunt. May 12th does work for staff.
Okay.
I will email the waiver and the request to your office a little later today.
Okay, let me ask staff again, do we as a commission, do we as a board, do we need to take some action related to accepting this request for waiver?
Motion.
Yes, we do.
To move for the continuance. And with that, Mr.
So the motion is not, for, I'm getting some clarity, you all may know this, I don't. The motion is not for the waiver, the motion is for the continuance.
Correct.
Okay.
The motion should be for the continuance conditioned on the submission of a written waiver to May 12th.
So that's the language of the motion. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, subject to receipt of the written waiver, I move that we continue preliminary plan 4-21030 to May 12th.
Second.
Thank you. There's a motion and there's a second. Motion made by Commissioner Washington, second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
And I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 0. This is continued until May 12th, and we're looking for a receipt of a request for the waiver. Thank you, Mr. Gingles. Thanks, Ms. Amirpour. Thank you, staff. And that is our final item on the agenda.
Thank you.
I want to thank staff and others for all the work today. There's one last question, of course. Mr. Hunt, is there any further business to come before the planning board today?
Mr. Chair, there are no additional business items before the board today. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all for your participation, and this meeting is adjourned.